So,
I've been waiting.
So I just want to hear. But this is about creating character. Cool babies.
hello, hello participants, hello our web audience. I am here to introduce Dave Hansen, our dungeon master, official dungeon master at Oak Lawn Public Library. It's awesome that you're here for
Yeah.
And before Dave gets started, I wanted to show you some cool things that we have in the library collection that you can check out that might be interesting for you if you are interested in D&D. And so the first thing is our Dungeons and Dragons starter set that you can check out through the Beyond Books collection that's upstairs. And so Beyond Books items include games. We also have video cameras. If you like cosplay, we have a Cricut, we have a sewing machine that you can check out. I see your eyes kind of expressing some interest there. We have a GoPro if you want to do cosplay and then take a video of yourself. We also have some other games that are kind of similar to Dungeons and Dragons, but different. We have Dragon's Gold, which looks fun, and of course, the extremely famous Catan. So this is, I believe, the original Catan.
That looks like the original base.
Yeah.
I think it was 1998 is when it first came out.
Yeah, that's.
I recently learned a lot about Catan.
Well, maybe we'll have to make a Catan. How to play and it's something that would be like an all day thing, right?
I played long games of Catan.
Yeah, so anyway, I just wanted to show you these things and I'm gonna turn things over to Dave, who's gonna talk about designing characters for Dungeons and Dragons.
Hi, welcome everybody and everyone online. Hello. My name is Dave. I run D&D here at the library last year or this year and hope to continue to keep running D&D. Some of my background is I started learning, was eight. My dad here taught me D&D. And I had no idea what I was doing. So I didn't know what kind of character I wanted created. All I kind of knew is like, I watched X-Men, the cartoon, and I was like, I want to be the shapeshifter. Yes.
I met the Riddler at CP too.
Johnny Glover.
Yeah.
He's really, from what I've heard, he's a really cool dude.
Yeah, I saw him. I have a signed print from him.
Nice. I also really liked him on Smallville, so.
Yeah, that sounds like.
Smallville Scrooge. He's been around a lot. And so back in the day, he let me create, since I couldn't shapeshift into people, he let me, I believe I played a druid who could change into animals. For me back then, I was like, okay, that sounds very cool. And then I've even had experience, didn't play for a bit, and then when I came back around college, I played a rogue randomly that a friend was just like, we have a missing player, can you jump in and play this rogue? I'm like, sure. And the cool part was like figuring out how to use this rogue in the capacity of like, we have all these puzzles and all these traps, how am I gonna help and contribute to the group? And then I've also played Bard, and Bards typically will play, if anyone saw the new D&D movie, Chris Pine plays a lute or a guitar like instruments. They also play flutes, different, usually musically inspired. But I took a few points. If anyone's ever seen an old Mel Brooks movie called History of the World, yeah, I wanted a bard to be more like a stand-up comedian. So his way of telling stories around the world was just presenting in front of pubs and taverns, and also my DM created a little bit more of a backstory. He was actually more world renowned. So I was also super rich. So it probably meant I presented in front of and then I was also a halfling, so I was also really short. So it was really weird to be walking like through this lavish house that I owned And then having like a giant cloak like made for a king, but it's just dragging behind my body because I'm about 3 feet high. I'm like a hobbit. And this panel is a little bit about like the steps of creating a character, but also finding inspiration about creating characters. Some of the steps, of course, they say like choose a species and then choose a class. I always say think about what kind of character you want to make, or talk with your party to see what is everybody else playing and see what might be complementary. So if you have a bunch of people who are they use swords, they use bows, they use clubs and axes, maybe you want to be the magic user of the group. Or you might want to be the healer because they're going to be probably hurt a lot. So talking with your group can also help you just kind of find what is available or what could be complementary to the group, or just do whatever you want. And then sometimes it's all about leaving it up to the fate of the dice. So you could have a group with no magic users or healers. It might be a little bit more difficult to get through an encounter, but you want to play what you want to play. Of course, on this, I've handed out the character sheet. And then when you have kind of decided on what species and class you're going to play, once you go through that, it will describe different attributes that you have, like say, an elf has the ability of dark vision. So their eyesight's just as good in caves without a torch. However, say a clumsy human will trip over a rock if they don't have a torch. Just to kind of give examples. But maybe you're okay with that and you want to create a character who, I sometimes say like using fiction and nonfiction characters as maybe a template can be really cool. If you really like Lord of the Rings, you can make a character like Aragorn, who's a human ranger, who uses a two-handed sword or his bow and arrows. Or maybe you want to be a wizard like Gandalf, but I feel like Gandalf's maybe more like a druid because a lot of the wizards, from what I've observed from the movies, because I haven't read the books, is a lot of their magic's based in nature. They speak to animals. And there are spells like that that allow you to speak to animals or to plants. So you can create a character maybe like Gandalf, or maybe there's a character from science fiction. Maybe you want a rogue who's like Han Solo. So maybe they do have a sword, but maybe they use dual crossbows. So that way they're just like, they have that, you know, he's charming, so his charisma is going to be a little bit higher. But he's also going to be agile, so he can duck behind a box and not take a hit. Or he can be maybe Luke Skywalker. It might be maybe like a paladin or a cleric, where he does use a sword, but he also has abilities that are magically, some would say maybe the Force is a little magical. So you could create a character like that. And when you're going through this, like I said, you can also use a different species if you want to look through it, because there are some that will give you, like I said, different attributes that will give you advantages. I think like halflings make better rogues because they have a little bit more dexterity and they're smaller. So they might not be seen as easily. And then, of course, you have your different character traits. They have different ways that you can add your points for your strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. There are ways where you can roll dice. I believe, and I'd recommend talking to your DM what they prefer. One way would be like rolling 4 d6s and taking the top 3. And then that would be your point that you put in whichever slot you want. Or there is a breakdown. I always forget the ones, but it is 15, 14, 13, 12, 28. And you put those in the different traits that you want. So like I said, with a Han Solo character, him being a rogue, I would say his dexterity is going to be really high because he's using crossbows or bows and probably not being in the middle of a fight. He's going to be a little bit more dexterous. But because he's charming, you might want to put charisma as your next highest stat. And then, or if you want to create like someone who's a burly barbarian, you'd maybe put all your points into strength because a lot of his attacks are going to be strength based. So, like I said, usually when putting in those points, talk to your DM to see, just so everyone in the group also creates a character points the same. And then based on the species and the class that you pick, there are some different proficiencies, things you're going to be better at. And they'll list, I remember like rogues, you can put into sleight of hand if you're going to be like a pickpocketer, or always trying to remember these, or if you're going to also be the person who does hiding and sneak attacks. There's also proficiency in stealth. All the information on that is once you create your species and class, it'll tell you what you can put those into. And then you can also think about it when they say which ones you can pick. Like I said, depending on the kind of character you want to create. If you want to put maybe points into animal handling, if that's an option, if you want to be the kind of character who tries to tame a dire wolf, it can be very difficult, but maybe that's a kind of character you want to create. You want to have like your animal pet by your side. Or if you want to be the person who just kind of bumps, maybe throws a poker game, and because they have a high sleight of hand, they can always maybe tilt the dice in their direction or hide an ace up their sleeve, whatever the case may be. And then there's also a lot of the information on the sheet will be, once you go through it, it will tell you like what's available. Like your armor class will be based on the type of character you pick and the species, and then also what kind of armor you're proficient at. A fighter might be able to wear heavy armor, which will give them a higher armor class, which makes them harder to hit. But it may also give them a disadvantage on, like, say, stealth checks or his dexterity, because he's going to just be a big pile of, I'm going to metal that you're going to knock over. If you can, he's going to be hard to get up, but he's going to be hard to knock down. Or you could be like a rogue or a ranger, or even some of the magic casters can only wear like a light or a medium armor. So they might be a little bit more dexterous if it allows for it. I mean, a wizard might be more focused on casting spells and dodging attacks. But if you want to make them a nimble magic user, you can. Or if you want to make a barbarian who's got a lower intelligence, so he might not be able to read books, but he can sure take a hit, but you can also make him a lovable, charismatic barbarian. So, when you use these sets, you can also use them into the role playing. If your intelligence happens to be lower, you can use that into how your dialogue goes. Or if you're an intimidating barbarian, you can also use that when trying to basically interrogate and get some information from someone. Or that Han Solo person will charm them into giving up the information without even knowing it. So those are kind of the different things I just want to bring up, because I know playing D&D can seem intimidating. There's a lot to it, but I just want you to, there's a lot of information that you can get from online or, talking to your dungeon master or your other players. I'm kind of thinking of that first character you're going to create or the next character. Or if you randomly just throw a character, you can look at the stats and go with it and say, this is what I have. This is the kind of character I'm going to make him now. Because you know what? He's a super smart barbarian, but he doesn't have a lot of hit points. So he's going to just try to dodge a lot of attacks. Because there are options. I use a site called dndbeyond.com. There they have a lot of information where you can actually just randomly create a character or fill out all the information, recommend spell, like it'll just choose pretty much everything you're gonna need. And there's options where you can make it like really cool, or it's a really loaded dice rolls where it's like I mentioned, you may have a ranger who's maybe not as who doesn't have as great perception, so he's not going to be a great tracker, but he'll be a decent shot with a bow and arrow. So there are options if you want to make things really interesting there, or like I said, thinking about fictional characters as an inspiration, because the type of character you want to play probably exists, but it's just trying to figure out how to use what's available in the book to create that kind of character. And the player's handbook will have everything you need to create a character. However, I do like to let you know that there are many books there that have different additional character information that you can use. So in the base book, they have dwarves and humans and elves and half orcs. However, there are books that allow you information on how to play a fairy character, or if you want to play a minotaur, you might have to talk to your DM about how you create that kind of character and how to track it. But it leaves options to the kind of characters you want to create. Like it just opens the door immensely. And then also there are books that'll expand on different magic spells that are available. So say if you become a wizard, but you want to focus more on time manipulation, there's information on that. So you might be focusing on spells that speed up your party so you attack or move quicker, or slow down your enemies, or things like that. So there are, like I said, options within this book and additional books. I usually like to say stay first with the player's handbook, because if it's your first time, they keep everything that's just available to everybody right there. But the options are always there, and you can also check out online or available. I want to say upstairs. I don't remember the desk. I know where upstairs on the second floor all the D&D books are.
Great, yeah.
You can also reserve them online or speak to the librarian here about reserving books. Does anyone have questions about creating characters? Yes.
Since you are a dungeon master and you do run a group, maybe you can help somebody maybe design their first character. It'd be cool to see an example like what you're talking about.
Sure. We'll use a character like from what we were mentioning. Let's go with Han Solo type character. So in this instance, we will go with he's simply a human. And as I mentioned, he is I'd say he'd probably be a rogue. And then from there, I would say I would then choose for like the stats, I'd probably put dexterity. A lot of rogue abilities are based in dex and their weapons versus like a fighter who uses more strength. For a Han Solo character, the next stat I'd maybe work on is charisma. So he's gonna be charming, he can make deals, maybe get a better deal on rewards, or maybe deals on sales at shops. And then say he's actually kind of wise because he's a smuggler.
Wise.
Because he knows like, I'd say he's street smart. I always remember intelligence is book smart, wisdom is street smart. So I would say he would probably put wisdom there because he knows maybe how to avoid being seen, like what routes to take to avoid maybe if he's smuggling goods, and that's maybe what you're trying to do is get like items to another town without being spotted. You know which routes to take without being avoiding the guards. So for those, I'd say those might be the top three for a Han Solo kind of character. Intelligence, he doesn't read a lot of books, might be the lowest stat. So then I'd maybe do a little bit higher strength and a little bit higher constitution. And the books would be at the bottom for him. And then from there, I'd say he wears light armor because he's usually wearing, trying to picture Han Solo right now.
Light leather.
Yeah, he'd probably be wearing, he wears pants and a vest. He's not wearing Mandalorian armor. So he'd probably be wearing light or medium armor. And then I would say he's probably the guy who kind of has, you know, he's got his trusty pistol, so he's got a crossbow at least. And then maybe a dagger, because I think of he shot first, so he would maybe be the person who has a small dagger that can't be seen. He might try to take someone out without being noticed. And then as far as skills, I would say his deception and persuasion would be probably something he'd focus on, because like I said, he's making the deals for the group, he's getting the extra money for the group. And then I'd say, I mean, he doesn't seem, he's too, it's weird to say, he doesn't seem intimidating. Maybe he could be if you gave him the opportunity. But I would also say maybe his sleight of hand is higher, because he's a, think about Solo the movie. He grew up on the streets stealing things and bringing them back to his group of other thieves. It's been a while since I've seen Solo. And then, yeah, I think, and then his speed would be based by a human. I think a lot of times their speed would be 30. The armor class is, if I remember, is 10. It's 10 plus dexterity plus whatever the bonus armor is, and a lot of that information is in the book. So off the top of my head, that'd be how I create a character like Han Solo, is using that kind of information and then translating it into D&D. So that way he'd be wearing, like I said, almost, I'm picturing the, like I said, since it's still fresh in my mind, Chris Pine from D&D. Maybe a leather vest over like a tunic and then leather pants. So he's going to be able to dodge an arrow if he is aware of it. But he'll also probably shoot first because he noticed someone's pulling a weapon on him first. So yeah, it's kind of the steps I go through for creating a character like Han Solo. And then the kinds of items that are available, they will give you options. You can choose, I think, like thieves kits or an adventure kit, and a lot of that information is also in the book and what's included in that. Or your dungeon master may just say, you have this much money, spend it as wisely as you may. And you can go shopping, but then whatever your allotment is, if you spend it all, you're not going to have any gold until you complete maybe your first adventure. So yeah, that's kind of how character creation. It's a little bit of your work and a little bit of work with the group as well as work with the dungeon master. I hope that answers your question. Or
I know you're dying to ask a question.
do you have a question as well? No. Does anyone have a kind of character some of you I recognize from DMD before, but what kind of characters do you like to play? I know you mentioned you created a few.
Yeah,
What kind of characters do you like to play?
I like playing like people who are like creative.
Okay.
And like their like skills.
So like maybe an artist kind of character? Okay. Musician or maybe like a painter?
Or more like a painter.
Painter, okay. I could even think like, maybe you create a rogue, but they also are like graffiti artists. That could be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Have you played before? Or-
I played back in like second edition.
Okay.
You got fifth now? Okay.
Fifth, and they're coming out with D&D 1, I think it's a new version they're working on, but what kind of character in second did you
I
like?
used to play it.
Thief? Okay.
Kind of like a in it for himself type character.
And that's,
You always see those came through, but you still was like about the money for him more than.
I think that's a cool thing about like characters is like you can all have different, like maybe the same class, but the way you play it may be differently. You know, you could have that or a Robin Hood kind of thief where he like steals and gives back secretly to those who need it.
That guy was pretty much in the shed every time like a battle came out into the shed.
But then you're gonna be like taking shots from the shadow.
But when it benefits him, then he'll attack, usually a backstab.
Yeah, and that's how rogues will usually play, but. And like I said, you can use the information also from the stats that you have, or. So maybe you get in the fray, but you're the kind of person who, you're not in the shadows, but you're gonna. Give someone support, so you're gonna be maybe stabbing the bad guy in the back. I know, Jad, you like Bard?
Druids actually.
Druid, okay,
I was first edition.
yeah.
Gary guys. Oh man, that was my favorite.
And I think if I remember before, like. Bard used to be a combination of characters, like there was a
Yeah,
Bard
Bard had to be a
class.
thief and a warrior at the same time. They had to reach level 27 at the same time. If they didn't, then you couldn't become a bard. So if you had one, and I actually tricked the guy almost out of becoming a bard by making him use his warrior skills too much.
I think that's the cool thing, at least fifth edition allows, there's just a Bard class, you can play a Bard.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a kind of character they want to create or?
Yeah, so about my case, I was trying to create still was, when we were playing last time,
Mhm.
I was basically going for lanes because my like, I not want to kill you unless I have to. I was gonna injure you just slightly.
You were an honorable thief.
I don't know. Not like ask you kind of.
Honorable.
So
He was like the Han Solo.
or a monk,
Or a monk.
or maybe like a cleric who's more support, has a shield to protect themselves, but will help their friends. When they get into a skirmish where they need backup or healing. So, and then we were talking earlier that the pre-made character, you would actually start to give him more of a backstory.
Yeah,
Which is a cool thing, is like thinking about like the kind of where your character came from. You don't always have to create that. But that is something you can think about when you're playing your character. Or maybe make it a storyline further into a campaign where it's like. You were mentioning in your character, he was abandoned by his father, so he didn't like the name his father gave him.
yeah,
Which is why you have no name in our pre-made character.
Which just made the game very complicated, because like, I would talk to you without addressing you.
and it's really, cause, oh, my dad, the hero, and that was that lies in him, he's not walking off to war.
Yeah,
But what could be interesting is like, maybe it turns out your father's still alive,
Yeah,
but he's secretly been working for a pain, so he's actually been. Almost like a James Bond kind of character, where he's actually working in the shadows, making deals happen between kingdoms or maybe making things happen for people's interests. So that's a cool thing, like, that's something we didn't think about, that wasn't on the sheet, you just came up with yourself, and it's like, that is something that could be explored later.
Yeah.
And I think,
Can I talk about mine?
yeah,
All right, I was like, I have a character from the first campaign I did, I was
fighter, yeah,
no, before that, I was a tiefling warlock.
okay,
And I decided that this guy basically became a tiefling because his father
that's all right.
traded his soul for fame.
Oh,
So because I read a thing and it said, like, tieflings are created because you
made a deal.
made a deal. So I was like, what if it wasn't his deal? What if it was his father's deal?
Ooh,
So I had him be, his father made a deal, traded his soul for fame, basically making the deal thinking, never gonna have kids, so I'll be able to win out the deal, and then he had a kid,
that's really
left
cool.
the girl in the tavern with the kid, raising that.
It's okay, it's happy
And
ending.
yes, and so now he has a bit of a problem with bards, because
He doesn't trust the bar.
Yeah, he doesn't trust the bards, and he's like, oh, they're figuring. And he's trying to find his father, which he hasn't done yet.
Yeah, and that gives your character motivation as well.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Maybe when you're in towns, like, anytime you stop at a tavern, you'd be like, yeah, any chance you heard of this guy? He's kind of a jerk, you know,
Yeah.
not a big deal,
Yeah.
but that's cool, and that's,
That was my.
Because in the thing, in the trade with the sheet, you go out, but doesn't want to disappoint his mom, because his mom doesn't know. It's a crook. He doesn't want, he's there, and he's always been there for his mom, I can't let her know, where this is coming from, always got to support her.
oh, so he's living a double life.
So that's why it said in the sheet that, he always support, his mom doesn't know he's a crook, and he didn't want him, like, okay, that's what it's not, I mean.
Yeah,
Cool.
And like, why did he become a thief? Why did he become a thief then? Like, that's why he became a thief. That's family.
that's really cool, and the book also gives like suggestions on backgrounds that you can create, or maybe traits. So like I said, maybe you're the kind of person who wheels and deals and getting better deals in the store. But maybe grease the wheels and get more money in a trade-off, like for a reward plus, like. One example that comes to mind is I once played a Ghostbusters RPG. And my character was described, the way the character was described, it almost sounded like a Peter Venkman. So once we finished the quest or the mission, which was trap a ghost in a high school, I was able to use my charisma to basically get a few extra $1,000 for, maintenance fees, retainment in the retainment field, weapon usage. So that kind of character you can create like with the higher charisma and maybe persuasion or intimidate, like, look, we worked really hard. If you don't give this, we may just give the ghost right back to you. And that's kind of like the using inspiration from what you're given to kind of flesh out your characters too. But if you want to just play the stats, you can. I think that's the one thing about RPGs is you can kind of play it the way you want. But the more you get comfortable with it, hopefully you get more comfortable playing the character like it's a living. It is a character. You're almost like an actor bringing it to life. Does anyone have any more questions or anyone else? I have blank character sheets if you want to take a look at what if you want to take a look at what 5th edition stuff looks like.
Well, thanks everyone for coming today to learn about D&D character development, and don't forget to come to after hours trivia tonight at the Cork and Bean. I think it's going to be lots of fun.
Yeah.
It's a
Coffee
cafe bar
shop.
kind of across the street. Yeah.
It's really cool because I went and did karaoke, but had a cappuccino at like midnight.
Yeah,
Um,
anyway, it'll be good trivia.
It's good though. I
Yes,
saw it.
I
Yes.
tried the food.
and it's really chill inside. It's a very nice place.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the trivia a lot. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, I've been in there, it's really cool.
and if anyone,
Good, well,
like I said,
great.
needs like access to the books, they're on the second shelf. Towards the